Hello, my name is Geraldine Mills, and the story I'm about to read is from my forthcoming collection from Ireland House. It's called Pretty Bird, Why You So Sad? We were out cutting wood. Greg had the chainsaw going full throttle and me feeding him the logs, careful with my fingers, the smell of resin in the air, sawdust peppering my boots, when we heard the gas guzzler pull into the yard. Greg switched off the machine. I whipped off my gauntlets. We were ready for the break anyway. We're used to locals dropping in for a squawk gawk, as Greg calls it, but this Jeep wasn't from around here. Its big, shiny door opened and two legs swung themselves out. Spit-polished shoes placed themselves on the gravel. A head emerged before the belly released itself from the driver's seat, bespoke suit straining at the seams. You know the sort of bucko I'm talking about, from a 2 up, 2 down, made his money in red diesel, angel dust. Not afraid to leave his footprints on your back as he climbs over you to get to where he wants. "Out you come, Lee," he said to a young Chinese woman stepping from the passenger seat. Sleeked jet hair framed a pretty face, almond eyes that had a frightened look in them as she peered up at him, waiting for a crumb of kindness to fall from his lips. You'd be anxious for her that she might fall frozen from a tree without complaining. "I'll have one of your birds," he said to Greg. "Something to jizz this one up a bit, take the long face off her." We're not in the habit of selling our birds, so Greg told him as much. We work hard to keep them in good fettle, buy them the best quality food, full spectrum lamps to brighten the grey, miserable days we get around here. We love to wake to their calling the morning into existence, watch their colours shouting at one another. The rainbow lorikeet with its orange jacket, the blue-fronted Amazon, the sulphur-crested cockatoo with a big sunny head on it. Let us have a look at them at least," he said. "Lee here wants to see them. Don't you, Petal?" The young woman nodded. "There's no harm in that, so," Greg said. Around the back of the house we went, your man telling Greg about the houses he still owned and the estate he'd finish as soon as things picked up. There was a ruction of feathers and wings as we came close, chirping and screeching as Greg called out to them. I couldn't take my eyes off Lee's sad face as she stood there. She put out her hand and touched the wire mesh. It was as if she was the one behind wires, dreaming of what it would be like out there among the birds in the lush foliage of jungle. A little smile appeared around her eyes when Charlie squawked at her to open the door, open the door. She moved along, standing for a while in front of the golden aureole. Then she stopped in front of a pair of the African parrots that were caressing each other with their bills. "You can see why they're called lovebirds," Greg said to her. "Wouldn't you like a little lovebird?" your man simpered and rubbed his big nose against hers in imitation. "No," she said quietly. "I'd like this one." Compared to all the others, the bird she was pointing to was not the sort that'd catch your eye even on a bad day. It had the look of a creature that might have been bright once, but had its colour washed away, leaving it with a long grey tail and beak, dull brown wing and crown as it pecked away on the bark of the branch. The more she looked, the more I saw the change come over her. A light entering her eyes, sadness dissolving as it slowly began to slip down her cheeks, down her shoulders, slip into the ground. Our vinous-throated parrotbill had switched the sun on inside her. Your man put his thick fingers into his pocket and pulled out a wad of money. "How much?" he insisted. "They're not for selling," Greg replied. "This pile of money would buy you 10 birds better than that." But Greg O'Halloran wasn't for budging and gave as good as he got. Listening to your man argue, you could see how easily he'd get an incinerator built on a protected habitat or a house on a floodplain. We were standing there and I looked at the little one opposite me, her head down. A tear fell. I poked Greg in the ribs with my elbow. "Let her have it." It galled him, but he's not a hard person. "You won't always get your own way, you know," he said to your man as he put the money back in his leather gauntlet. "Do you want to bet?" your man said. Greg walked away and picked up his saw. The smell of your man's money was in the house after his four-wheel drive had hit the dust. I opened all the windows to let the clean air in. Mrs. Nolan came for her free-range eggs. What with the Orpingtons and the Rhode Islands, we had a good few layers, and I had my regular customers. Mrs. Nolan swore by them for her sponge cakes. Who owned the fancy jeep, she wanted to know. Just another squawk gawper, I misinformed her. I was in the market the following week getting some of that nice sausage the Germans sell. It was making heavy rain and people nearly took the eye out of me with their umbrellas. Drips fell from the canopies down my neck as I tried to check out the egg competition. Duck eggs, big blue goose eggs, free range from down the country. I saw Lee standing behind a stall with its array of silk ties and handkerchiefs, two men quizzing her if they were the real thing, she showing them the label. The taller of the two bought one with a saxophone streaming down the length of the fabric. The other chose one covered in guitars. I went to go towards her, but she caught my eye, looked down into her biscuit tin of cash and started counting coins. She then busied herself with the burden of straightening the ties after the men had left. I crossed the road away from the market, and there was your man himself, one eye on her, his phone growing out of his ear as he bulldozed through a deal with whoever was at the other end. Letting on I was buying lettuce plants, I watched him as he closed his phone and headed across the road towards her without looking, cars pulling to a halt. All I could see was him bending over her and his hand jabbing her shoulder about something or other she had done wrong. With that, he moved through the crowds, slapping shoulders with his newspaper, shaking off the rain as he entered the coffee shop further up. A week later, Greg had gone off to a reps meeting in the community centre, and I was locking in the hens, making sure the mink wasn't skulking around, when I caught a movement out of the corner of my eye, making its way up the path. It was Lee, burdened by the cage in her hand, so I took it from her and brought her into the kitchen. I wasn't sure what she was saying as she tried to explain, moving her elbows back and forth to indicate what had happened. The gist of it was that the bird never settled. As soon as she took it home, it started to fret, barely took a bite to eat, flying around and round, bashing itself against the wire sides, trying to get out. I could see all right that it was in a sorry state. Its feathers were dull, dishevelled looking, a bald patch on its chest, where it was stress preening, as Greg calls it. We would have our work cut out for ourselves if we wanted to hold on to it. She was crying softly by now. She couldn't bear to see the pretty bird so sad. I stroked her hair, telling her that everything would be fine. So together we concocted the story she would tell your man. How she'd been cleaning out the cage and the parrot bill saw the open window. How she saw him fly over the rooftops, the church spire, up into the open space of the sky. I took her by the hand and we brought the cage out and placed it on the floor of the aviary. We opened the little wire door. We waited, biding our time, hoping. When we had all but given up, it gave a little hop and then another, out onto the floor of the enclosure. It looked around as if taking it all in, remembering, and then it flew up into one of the fancy new purchase Greg had just bought. It started to sing almost straight away.